Okay, I am gonna, we're gonna be screen sharing during this presentation, and we're gonna have to screen share backwards and forwards, so it might be a bit clunky, so please bear with us. So, as Krishna said, we're going to be talking about the official BBC Sherlock escape room. The game is now that we worked on the launch of and the opening year of back in 2018. Just some of the content that the very talented nerd pirates created for the campaign. So, who are we? My name's Kim. I am a social strategist and social listening person, and I also do a lot of audience mapping. I'm very much a pop culture person, like very, very into television and movies and the way fandoms work. And yeah, aside from that, also quite into fixing things with herbs. I have worked with clients across the board in my sort of 15 years-ish of being freelance. So I tend to work with a lot of entertainment brands, a lot of broadcast brands. These days I work with ethical brands a lot as well. That's kind of my vibe. I've worked on, I think I've actually worked on Superwholock. I've worked on Sherlock, on Supernatural, and on Doctor Who briefly. That was I think my claim to fame when meeting the nerd pirates. Do you guys want to take it from here?
Sure. How do you follow Kim's intro? I mean, gosh, she's legendary, right? But our names are Lily and Violet Adams, aka the Nerd Pirates, and we are a twin sister PR and marketing duo in games, entertainment, and in tech. My name is Violet. This is Lily, and for something like half a decade now, we've been working as strategists, consultants, and creatives on bold, ambitious campaigns for audiences across the UK, the USA, and beyond. And as Lily talks, I'm going to share my screen, so take it away, Lil.
Cool. So if the name Nerd Pirates didn't kind of give it away to you already, a little bit like Kim, we're also really proud specialists in fandom and in nerd culture. And it's been our absolute pleasure over the years to work on projects from some leading licenses and IPs in the world. So, you know, to kind of give our little humble brag moment, we've worked on licensed games from brands like Steven Universe, OKKO, DreamWorks' Troll Hunters, brands like Adventure Time, Spirit Riding Free, and the legendary Paw Patrol. So parents in the audience, I'm sure you'll feel us when we say we've watched an awful lot of Paw Patrol. We were the lead PR marketing and social media strategists on the international launch of, I think many of those titles, including the amazing Adventure Time Pirates of the Enchiridion, which some of you may remember from all the way back in 2018. For those of you who don't know Adventure Time, just a tiny bit of context, it's an absolutely genius 8-time Emmy Award-winning show from Cartoon Network, which is a kids channel broadcasting to currently, I think, around 94 million American homes. Seriously, if you haven't seen it already, it's amazing. Please go watch it. It's brilliant. Most recently, you'll also see the Nerd Pirates and me and Violet credited on the brand new Bratz mobile game. So shout out to Bratz fans in the audience here. And there, amongst a bunch of other things, we helped craft some epic in-game and social activations with names like Puma, the shoe brand, and Revolution Makeup over in the US.
When we're not too busy nerding out with big brands, we've also spent a whole lot of our careers working with companies on the cutting edge of audience engagement technology. So we spent several years as creative leads at the virtual reality marketing agency Virtual Umbrella, and all across 2021, we were proud to support the comms and marketing team over at the revolutionary cloud gaming startup Polystream. But if you really want to get to know about our route into this space, it's probably better to tell a story, which is that when we were 6 years old and we were improvising Digimon plays on a busted old dictaphone, we figured that it was a good idea for us to improvise for added realism, the ad breaks and the adverts as well.
So we are literally over the moon to be with you here today at the Modern Audience Conference with one of our all-time favorite people, the amazing Kim. We'll be sharing some of our stories and some of our insights. You'll be hearing more from us later on about how we got involved in one of our all-time favorite projects, which is Sherlock, the Game Is Now.
But for now, Kim, if that's okay with you, we're going to hand back to you to kind of set the scene and to kick things off.
Sure.
Amazing.
Let me go. Okay. Let me do it in presenter view. Better. So, what was the job? I was approached, I think, at the beginning of 2018, very end of 2017, beginning of 2018, for by an East London escape room company who had very successful, and they had recently acquired the rights to the BBC Sherlock official escape room. And they wanted some help with understanding who their audience were and how they would best launch their escape room. The budget was quite limited, so it was going to be a primarily social activation. And I was extremely excited to do this project because you don't very often get to just work on fun projects where you get to like really deep dive into fandoms and understand how things work together and actually be able to bring the things that you know outside of work into your job. What we're going to be sharing over the next half hour-ish is the story of how we created a completely organic social strategy to engage with one of the oldest fandoms in the world. And I think it's fair to say they can be a little feisty, the Sherlock fandom. So it was super important that we got this right and we didn't upset people. So I'm going to be talking about the bit that most people probably think is the least fun bit, which is the research and the strategy. And then I'll hand over to the Nerd Pirates to talk about the bit that people actually think is fun, the creative bit. But I'm here to explain that the strategy actually is quite fun and is super important, because without that, you've got nothing to lay the incredible creative on top of. So let me continue to try and find my speaker notes. Right. So the first thing that I think about when I am starting a social listening project are three big questions that I want to answer and understand as fully as possible before I go any further with the strategy. And that is, who are the audience? Like, where do they live? Which social platforms are they most likely to be on? And also, what do they like? Who are the audience always sounds like something that you would sort of intrinsically know if you're a fan, but it usually turns out after doing some social listening that the audience is not as clean cut as you imagine. Different facets of the audience live on different platforms. They're not often the demographic that you think. On and offline audiences are often quite different. I know that when I looked at this initially, I looked at like YouGov for the offline reporting. And I believe at the time YouGov were reporting that Sherlock fans were primarily male and ages 35 to 50. And when we did the social listening, it became immediately apparent that like the majority of the fandom is female and the majority of the fandom was under the age of 35. So next slide. So thinking specifically about who the fandom is, this doesn't apply as much anymore because things have really meshed in the last few years. But way back when, at the beginning of BBC Sherlock times, there were still very specific facets within the fandom. So there was the kind of the Holmesians, which were the original Sherlock fandom, who were all about the books are canon, nothing outside of books. They did tend to be that slightly older, more male, I don't want to say pompous, but occasionally that vibe. And then from there, we also had the Sherlockians, who were, it's when we started to see the fandom term a bit more female. And these guys at the time were focused around any adaptation of Sherlock alongside the text, the original books. So these guys were like Basil Rathbone through Jeremy Brett, all the movies in between. And then we kind of had an addition that only came about after season 1 of BBC Sherlock was released, which was the Cumberbitches, who were again an extension of the Sherlockians and were so obsessed with just the BBC Sherlock. So this is just the hardcore fandom. Outside of that, we had sort of different levels of fandom, which I will discuss a bit later, but just being able to identify who the various parts of the fandom were and how we'd be best interacting with them and who we should be cautious of and who was more likely to be friendly was a really great first step for us. And then I wanted to look at the platforms to understand where the posts were being sent. I had a variety of social listening tools to run searches, both historically and in real time, to understand who's talking about what, where, when, and in what volume. So one of the things that we learned doing the social listening is that Twitter was definitely like the hub of the real-time conversation that was happening, but Tumblr was like out of control. I think I ended up not actually doing Tumblr searches because it was going to cost so much money, because like in a month that Sherlock wasn't airing, there were still over 2 million posts on Tumblr because they loved it so hard at that stage. Yeah. This slide seems really boring if you're not me. This shows us how influencer networks cluster around the Sherlock fandom. So basically the bigger the dot in the middle, the more influential the person. And then you can also see how they're all connected. And this data allows us to understand like which influencers we should be talking to get to the widest possible fandom. A lot of the time when people put together influencer strategies or micro influencer strategies and they don't look at the influencer networks beforehand, you'll find that they do a massive amount of work and they end up talking to quite a small audience because all of the influencers are connected to one another or have very similar audiences. This allows us to make sure that we're reaching all of the people by selecting influencers who have the broadest networks and who don't have the exact same networks as the rest of the influencers. We also needed to understand the content that the fans were interested in. So to get this information, I took all of the social data that I had amassed and then analysed that my own understanding of both internet culture and multi-fandoms. And then I was able to create these graphs based on social share of voice. So we were able to understand who the most liked characters were on Sherlock. We were also able to understand the multi-fandom. Obviously, I knew Super Hulock was a thing. So I knew there was going to be some multi-fandom activity, but we also wanted to understand what the extent of crossover with other big fandoms were, like how many people were also very interested in Harry Potter or Supernatural, because we'd be able to use that information to craft a social strategy that resonated with people and give fans those little Easter egg treats that they love so much. And then not going to mention it very much here, but John Locke kept coming up as something that the fans were particularly into. But again, when you are working with an official partner, sometimes there are issues that you cannot get into. So we were able to understand things we should be avoiding and things that the fandom were very interested in. So from all of that information, that huge data set, I mined it down into the insights that I've shared with you and many more. And from there, I was able to create the social strategy. So before I share with you what the strategy was, I just want to try and make sure that I hammer this point home as hard as I possibly can. You need all three. Great social storytelling does not happen on its own, and you really do need to have a good strategy. You need this as the groundwork that all of the fun creative can be laid on top of. A really good strategy doesn't actually stop people being creative. It just gives you parameters to help the creative do its job better. So these three areas have to be working together at all times. Otherwise, you're not going to have the success that you want. So the first thing I did to begin work on the strategy was to group the fans into various groups so we could understand where they lived, where we were going to talk to them, and what we were going to talk to them about. And here, I wanted to concentrate on the groups based on sort of size. So the smallest group, who were the group that we were going to interact with probably the most, who were the ones who would be so excited, were the hardcore fandom. And then outside of that group, slightly bigger, was the wider fandom, who were people who were like still part of the fandom, but not like staying up until 4 a.m. doing ciphers. And then we had the fans, who are definitely like fans of the show and know things about the show, but might not be like, you know, going to cons and talking about it. And then the widest group of people were viewers who like the show, but probably not enough to be following it on social. And we needed to have these guys because we would ultimately end up targeting them with paid media. And it's important to keep an eye on how you're going to bring in the broadest possible audience, while also talking a very specific language that the hardcore fandom are going to respond to. So this was the outline of the social media strategy. This is just like the simplest way that I can possibly distill these things. Is just figure out which channels you're going to use, and then figure out who you're going to talk to, why you're going to talk to them, what you're going to be saying to them, and when you're going to be saying to them. If you can take all of that and boil it down to this, then it's going to be so much easier for your community managers and your creatives to start building the creative on top of this. So we got as far as understanding the what, the who, the where, and also during all the research it became incredibly clear that May the 22nd was International Sherlock Holmes Day, and although it was getting very little social buzz at the time, it really felt to me like it was the perfect opportunity to let the fans know that something was coming. We were not going to be able to launch the entire thing at that stage because there were a few delays along the way, but it just seemed like a perfect opportunity that we could not miss. And now I'm going to hand back over to the guys. Are you good?
Amazing, perfect. And just to reiterate before we get into this next part, hearing also Kim talk about her role, everything we say from this kind of part on the talk could never have happened without that basis of strategy. Thank you for your reiterating, Kim, that creative cannot work without strategy. It simply doesn't function. So I guess with that caveat, we'll launch in.
So now it's time for us to tell our part of the Game Is Now story, and that roughly begins, as Kim said, in 2018, when we were brought on to support Sherlock The Game Is Now as creatives. And our first really big task was to help Kim and the team find what's called a creative wrapper for the Game Is Now social presence. And for all the non-marketing people out there, don't panic. The word creative wrapper is a term used in the industry to describe a sort of overarching creative idea or a vision for a campaign. And it's normally something that's used to give cohesion to all the different moving parts and help bring it all together. We knew our creative wrapper was going to be really important, and we knew it needed to achieve a few very important things. So one, it needed to provide a unique look and feel for our social accounts, allowing everything to fit nicely together and feel like it's part of one campaign. Two, it needed to give us a clear sense of creative direction so that our team and all the other teams involved were on the same page about what makes our approach special. And three, and this is the really crucial one, our wrapper needed to be something that was going to genuinely excite the imagination of the Sherlock fandom. And to address this part of the task, part of our job was to look at Kim's amazing data, and part of it was to use our instincts with that data to build out a sense of what fandoms really like and get under the hood of what makes a Sherlockian tick. With that in mind, we at Nerd Pirates, we like to think about the idea that traditional fandom culture, and Kim's touched on this, is to some extent always intrinsically interactive mode of engaging with the story. It's something that's recreative and it's performative with things like fan art and cosplay, conventions and fanfic. And this is especially true of like a super big, creative and highly engaged fandom like that for BBC's Sherlock. We like to think of the hardcore fan base as both readers and authors. They watch the show, but they're also active creators and participants in what we call paratexts that extend and transform the story in new ways. And amazingly, we can actually see this kind of behavior. I mean, Kim said it's one of the oldest fandoms, from Sherlock fans going back as far as the Holmes stories and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle himself.
Many of you may remember that consummate fandom story of Sherlockians, or Holmesians, as they were known back then, reacting to Sherlock Holmes's fictional death in the stories by wearing black armbands in real life as a sign of mourning. It's possibly an apocryphal tale, so researchers aren't entirely sure how true it is that fans actually reacted like at the time, but you get the picture. And overall, these behaviors as a collective show us something really important about the Sherlock community, which is that Sherlock fans have this collective desire to interact with and be a part of the story. They want to feel as if they're stepping into that fictional world and that they can extend and shape it in their own way.
So with all of this in mind, we knew our creative wrapper had to be something special. We needed to transform the social media accounts into a narrative space that allowed fans to feel that they're interacting with the story and entering the world of Sherlock. We wanted them to feel like engaging with our content was like taking part in their very own episode of Sherlock, complete with clever setups, dramatic turns, and dazzling reveals. And to go a little bit into the more sort of the abstract side of this, we needed to move beyond the outdated paradigms that position social media as a simple tool for broadcasting information to an audience. Instead, we needed social media to be an entry point for immersed spectators, and maybe even more radically, immersed recreators, allowing them to operate as interactive and transformative agents in a grand story that we all tell together. And on a simple side, we also needed it to be flexible, and we needed the creative wrapper to actually look cool, because no one's going to engage with the story if it looks awful.
Which brings us to our solution. So out of the conversations that we had, and a lot of conversations we had at this early stage between us at Nerd Pirates, Kim, and the wider Game Is Now team, the solution as a creative wrapper that we came up with was based around two broad ideas. And they were become a consulting detective and enter 221B. Become a consulting detective was our way of saying that the Game Is Now's social media channels needed at their core to embody this fantasy of being a Sherlockian case solver specifically. At the most basic level, this meant our social media content needed to offer our audience a sense of interactive challenge and difficulty. And this was things like inviting them to solve puzzles, to put together clues, to think in wild deductions and put their cleverness to the test, giving them the chance to really live in the shoes of the world's greatest detective. This also meant adopting a philosophy from day one of being really comfortable with mystery and intrigue in our work, perhaps a lot more comfortable than a lot of marketing folks are actually used to being who haven't had experience with these fandom communities. We had to be willing at every opportunity, really, not to give the fans what they wanted, not to give them the information they wanted up front every time, but instead to be willing to hold back on many of our big reveals, knowing that this highly engaged Sherlock fan base would be excited to come and meet us halfway and to do the rest of the work for themselves, kind of like, I guess, Sherlock himself would when he was on a case. Visually speaking, this become a consulting detective idea brought with it the visual motifs of the pinboard, which you can see Anderson here, that cackling gif, that's Anderson with his own pinboard looking excellent. And this idea of the kind of conspiracy wall. You can see these in the show.
Enter 221B was our secondary touchstone concept for the creative wrapper, and this one is as short and as simple as it could possibly be, which is that if fans are going to look at our content, they've got to be reminded of 221B, which is the flat that Sherlock and John share in the show. And that means referencing things like that iconic wallpaper, the magnifying glass, the deer stalker, and the smiley face with bullet holes.
Okay, so far so good. With this creative wrapper in place, Kim's amazing research and strategy in place, we had all of our conceptual ducks in a row. But now for this next part of the talk, we're going to jump ahead a little bit to Nerd Pirates' time as ongoing creative consultants and community managers on the project to give you a sense of how this creative wrapper and this strategy and this research played out in reality on campaign itself. There are so many cool examples we could talk about here today. I mean, it was a long campaign and we did lots of really exciting stuff. There was Summer of Sherlock, cosplay contests, riddles and everything. But for today, we're just going to focus on a few of our favorite moments. And we'll kick things off by taking a look at what Kim mentioned, that first really big social media beat on International Sherlock Holmes Day.
Okay, so story time, buckle up, I'm going to tell you what happened. So International Sherlock Holmes Day was at the beginning of our whole campaign on the 22nd of May, and this was the first time we were speaking publicly to fans. And it's important to note, they did not know what we were as a company, and they did not know that a Sherlock escape room was coming. We were starting from a completely clean slate, and we knew we needed to get the fans' attention in a big way. The day began with a mysterious video message from Sherlock's creators, Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat. In the video, they announced that something big was coming to the Sherlock fandom. They said hi, they chatted, they played with Deerstalkers, and had a super fun, light-hearted conversation about Sherlock and what they hoped this new, amazing, mysterious thing could be. They teased fans that it could be a Sherlock cutlery set, a bread bin, or something a whole lot bigger. The post tagged our account and introduced our keystone hashtag, #TheGameIsNow. And in keeping with Kim's strategy and our planned approach, we didn't confirm anything at this stage. So we didn't do any reveal of the escape room. We didn't suggest what partners or companies were involved. We just dropped a few spicy hints and set up a few clues, and we waited to see what would happen next. And right on cue, we could see that we'd hit on something pretty amazing with the fandom. Barely seconds had passed and fans were already excitedly trying to position themselves as Sherlockian case crackers, trying to work out the answer to our implied riddle. So you can see here some examples of fans trying to figure out what the hell was going on because we dropped this spicy hints. So we had Jared say, my prediction is that the game is very literal, and considering they mentioned London specifically, it could be location-based, a bit like Pokemon Go using AR. And Planet O'Brien says, maybe the Sherlock cast is doing a Sherlock tour and it all starts in London. So we barely set up this whole solve the case storyline, and already fans were trying to be detectives and solve the case. Or as a fan later put it, her name is Neha Sharma, she said, the game, my love, is on. And this time the game is coming to us like a tale, like a real interaction for something we always wanted but never imagined. And she finished it off by just saying, screaming. From there, as Nerd Pirates as a team, we knew how critical it was at this early stage to use replies and comments as community managers to then help confirm fans' roles as a welcome consulting detective in our story, and to just reward them for having a willingness to play with us online. And I've got a few examples here. You've got Elsie, for example. I love this. She entertains the idea about making a deduction about the game is now. She says, the game is ... something, shrug emoji. And right away, we're there with a sassy Sherlock quote and a wink to hopefully make her laugh and to encourage her to keep going. We say, perfectly sound analysis, but I was hoping you'd go deeper. And for the Sherlock fans out there, yes, this is a quote, direct quote from the show. It's what Sherlock says to John during their very first shared deduction sequence in the episode A Study in Pink. And it's, I guess, something of a fandom wink to the idea of starting on a new case together. It might sound a bit crazy. People always laugh when I say this, but at Nerd Pirates, we like to think about this kind of work as doing some improv theatre with the online community. It's essential to let them know that each time they show a willingness to put their imaginative work into our story, there's a partner ready to jump in and keep that energy going, to be their collaborator and to keep the ball in the air. So, we've got an example here. They might hit us with a Moriarty reference. Sarah says, by order of the king, that's Moriarty, you have to tell us what you intend to do. And she's referencing Moriarty's famous line here, honey, you should see me in a crown. And, in keeping with our fandom knowledge, we snap right back with, nope, we're on the side of the angels, which is quoting Sherlock's comeback to Moriarty from later in the same episode. Because, if we're asking fans to be agents in our story here, we have just got to show them we've got the skill and the fandom knowledge to keep up with all the stuff they're going to throw at us. So what came next? So we'd got the fans' attention, but we hadn't actually told them anything. So the next thing was the Mary Queen of Scots cipher, which is where I think things start to get really, really interesting. The next logical step may have seemed to have done a big reveal. So tell the fans, thanks for trying to guess, everyone. Drum roll, please. It's an escape room. But as you've probably guessed by now, we had something a bit more elaborate up our sleeves than a simple reveal post. And what happened next was our very own Moriarty-like scheme of breadcrumb clues, mini reveals and teases, all laid out in a fun, interactive narrative for the fandom to follow. So cue Mission Impossible music, let's break down what happened. Cool, so stage one of our crazy Moriarty scheme for teasing the fans and getting them excited was we set up a hidden passworded page on the official Game Is Now website at the URL gameisnow.com/clue. This site showed 5 screen grabs of different fan theories about the game is now, and we found all of these posted organically by fans on social media. 4 of them were incorrect theories, but one of the theories correctly guessed that this was an official Sherlock escape room that was coming. A headline at the top of the webpage teasingly told fans one of these theories is correct. The page isn't actually available online, so sadly you can't go find that now, but there is a rough screen grab here. This page was completely hidden from view on our site. You couldn't find it on the nav bar, and I don't believe you could find it on Google, and only someone with the password Fort Knox could get into the website and see this content. Stage 2, we posted this on social media. It says, "It's not time for the big reveal just yet, but how about a new breadcrumb on the trail? Crack the code and the password is yours, thegameisnow.com/clue, and then our hashtag." And beneath you can see an animated cipher clue, which is actually based on a 16th century code used by Mary, Queen of Scots. Any amazing intrepid fans who figured it out and managed to solve the cipher would get the password Fort Knox, which they could use to get into the website and access our juicy hidden webpage. Stage 3. Okay, this next part, once again, we had to hold our nerve as community managers, creators in a team. We just wanted to watch and wait to see how the fandom would respond. And the hope was that we'd achieve several things. First and foremost, that the fans would have some fun solving our Sherlockian mystery and cracking into our website page. Cracking a 16th century code is no mean feat, and we knew it would take them, we predicted it would take them a long time, although as it turns out, some of them did it very quickly. But more than that, we also hoped they'd feel really excited and rewarded by seeing their own conspiracy theories they posted online echoed back at them as official clues on our website, showing them how much we were genuinely listening to what they had to say and proving that their interactions were having a real impact on the story that we were telling. Once again, the results were pretty spectacular. I mean, we weren't surprised because the Sherlock fans are rabid and they have so much enthusiasm. Countless fans across the world got stuck in, putting their wits to the test, and we received literally hundreds and hundreds of messages from Sherlockians telling us how happy they were to have a chance to solve a real-life case. And a random story here, we actually had a few fans try and hack the website. So we got some messages from fans who had gone into the source code of the website and actually discovered the page before we even posted the clue leading them to it. So that's how engaged these fans actually were. And shout out to Elsie, Dominique, and Wolfino. Those are the fans who figured it out very, very quickly, and they're all amazing. Okay, so I know now we're kind of coming to the end of the time we have to talk about our part of the story. We'll talk more with Kim in a moment. But before we hand back to Kim for that kind of roundup section, we'd love to say a few words about our community management on the project, not just as creators, but we also came on as community managers. When we talk about best-in-class interactive campaigns like this one, I think it's really easy to assume that it's only those big flashy moments that matter, like the ones we've mainly chatted about today. The big announcements, the special events and activations, the cool competitions and kooky mystery solving activities. And we had tons and tons of those on the Game Is Now, loads of them. But I think we'd be remiss to say that without the day-to-day community management of the Game Is Now social channels, the daily tending of comments and messages and DMs, I don't think, and I think, you know, Kim's already mentioned this, none of the work we did could have been as successful as it was without that component. Yeah, it was something we agreed really early with Kim and the whole team that it wasn't going to be enough for us just post cool bits of hero content and just let it be. Mm-hmm. Behind all these big campaign moments with their drama and their mystery needed to be the more ongoing daily interactions with fans, actually answering their questions, being available, being prompt when they talk to us, and being an authentic and friendly participant in what is, after all, their fandom community. Mm-hmm. That we want to be a part of. And they need to trust us, because they're not going to respond to you if they think you don't like Sherlock or you don't like fans or you don't like fandom. And if they think that you get them, then they're going to get on board. It's as simple and as unfakeable as that. And we've got just a few examples here of that kind of fandom style community management. We've got we've got Maria, for example. I love this. She wants to have a digital tea party with us. She writes, "Game Is Now, I'm having some tea to celebrate this incredible announcement at 221B. Would you like some?" And, you know, without hesitation, we're right there with her. We reply always with a Sherlock tea sipping gif.
And we actually spent a little while after this interaction shooting Sherlock tea-sipping gifs back and forth at each other for like, I think it was for quite a long time across the day. And it was kind of our opportunity to do a little bit of digital cosplay as Mrs. Hudson and Sherlock sharing an afternoon cup of tea together. I mean, time and time again, and we're really proud of this, the fans could rely on us to kind of just get it. We've got some comments here from just one fan, Sherlock's blog, who says, I don't usually say this, but at 221B's owner is freaking amazing. So many replies to as many as he/she can. Great job. And we had DMs like this very often, many DMs like this, saying things like, you are all fantastic. I don't know who runs this account, but just because you answer to fans, it's one of my favorite accounts. Thank you for existing. So it's incredible to see that the effort we were putting in from, again, all the way from strategy, creative to community management was really felt on the other end by fans. And honestly, as professionals in this space, there is nothing more gratifying than seeing responses like this from fans. Really, really, really.
And on that amazing note, I think it'd be a great time now to hand over to Kim to tell you a little bit about the stats for this campaign, because they're pretty extraordinary. So we'll hand over to you, Kim, now to give us some juicy data and numbers.
Right. So hopefully everyone can see that. What did it all add up to? I should say that we, that is not working. Wait. Right, sorry. Good, Mercury retro, excellent. We ran the campaign from, I think we launched on May 22nd, which was International Sherlock Holmes Day. And then I did this roundup report towards the end of November, I think. During that time, obviously you've seen some of the Nerd Pirates' amazing content, but it was an always on campaign, but with like key moments. So we did the launch, we did the big reveal, and then there were some delays with the room opening, so we had to continue the campaign a little longer than we would have liked to. And thinking on our feet, we came up with the idea of Summer of Sherlock, which was basically a week in July that sort of ended with a real life 221B being built at the London Film and Comic Con, where we partnered with a variety of influencers and invited cosplayers along. And we also did an answer time on Tumblr. We were lucky enough to have some quite good friends at Tumblr who set up an answer time for us with the creators of the show. And all of the various activities, plus the amazing community management that the Nerd Pirates put together for us, meant that over the course of those months, we managed to accumulate over 54 million organic impressions, which is like very impressive. You don't see those numbers on organic social, especially if you're starting from nothing. Like we started on May 22nd with 0 fans anywhere. We had over 120,000 links clicked, so it wasn't just people like seeing our stuff, they were actually interacting with it on a very regular basis. We received over 72,000 messages in that course of time, and there were over 1,000 messages sent, which is like a huge amount for community managers, especially if there are only 2 of them not working full time. So taking all of the data and the strategy, and I think the other thing that we haven't like really touched on that much is like the love of the show that we all had, that enabled us to be able to work this way. We were able to take all of that and turn it into like what was a very successful campaign, without the ad spend didn't come in until far later. So you guys can unmute so we can chat about the
Totally.
Key takeaways.
We thought it'd be a nice way to end because we did a lot of talking and there were so many moving parts to this campaign that we thought it'd be cool to sort of boil it down into a little cheat sheet for you so you can come away feeling like, yeah, they gave me a cheat sheet.
Yeah, we'll go through just some of the key things that we think were the most important to the success of the campaign, and maybe just between us and you, Kim, if we just back and forth a little bit about why we think these were such important takeaways, and just give you guys a bit of insight into what was the most kind of critical parts of this campaign.
Okay. I'm going to do the first one because it's mine. So I cannot, again, we've tried to hammer this point home over and over again, but having a data-driven strategy that really gets the audience was key here. If we'd gone in without fully understanding the different types of fandom, where they lived, and knowing that we wanted to do anything cosplay based on Instagram, and we wanted to have gift conversations on Tumblr, and that, you know, Twitter was where we were just going to focus all our real-time conversation. Like, without that framework that came from listening and understanding the fandom, and then also understanding how the social platforms work, we wouldn't have been able to have the Nerd Pirates create amazing content and also be able to react so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of plays into the second point, which was the proper channel strategy. And I will continue to say this until the day I die, because we are like 15 years into social media now and people are still not doing this right. Different content for different channels, guys. Fans behave in different ways on different channels. It's possible that fans are following you on all your platforms. You probably don't want to put the same content out on all of your platforms. Like, understand which fans live on which platforms and what they want to interact with, and make sure you put that content there.
And then kind of
following
up, taking up on kind of number 3, everything being driven by a fandom first creative wrapper, which again plays into the fact that we understood the audience, we liked the show, we had the data, but also a creative wrapper that was built for narrative and interactivity from the ground up. And I think for us, that was always so critical, that going into this, we didn't have a kind of look, a feel, a vibe that felt like a series of adverts, that it felt like that we were just broadcasting, hi fans, it's an escape room, you know, don't you like that? You know, we didn't want it to feel like we were just broadcasting information to people. And I think it was critical that we built a creative wrapper that felt like the show, that looked like the show, but most importantly, gave people that energy of the show, that feeling of interactivity that their fan base has. Because the fans, and we say this a lot, fans know what they're doing. Fans are exceptional people, and they spend a lot of their time in their communities producing amazing work. And as marketeers, the best you can really hope for is that you're going to produce a fandom campaign that just gives them that same feeling of energy, that when they watch the show and when they're fans on Tumblr or on Twitter, wherever it is, it just gives them that feeling, that genuine sense that, wow, this is like an episode of Sherlock. This is, but online. This is, you know, like going to a Comic-Con, but online.
And 4 and 5, I'm going to kind of combine. Obviously, with 4, you have to have community management underpinning all of this. There's no point doing an amazing campaign if someone messages you with like a technical problem and you don't reply. There's just no point. So don't bother doing all of this amazing stuff if you haven't got the practical basics in place. And lastly, we talked a lot. This team spoke a lot, and we got on a lot, and we understood each other, and the broader team understood each other, and that's why everything worked in sync, because nobody was working in a silo. We had open communication between the teams, and we shared a vision, so we made sure we were always on the same page.
That's
amazing.
It.
Yeah, that's it, guys. I mean,
I remember to hit the button.
Yeah, and you know, obligatory shout out, please do follow us on Twitter, follow Kim, follow us. We've got good stuff going on our Twitter accounts, and yeah, thanks for listening to us.
Excellent. Well, that was brilliant and really, really interesting and detailed, and thanks to all 3 of you. I've got a few questions here, so can I run those into you?
Sure, go for it.
Great.
Go wild.
Okay, I mean, first, it was an interesting thing as I was thinking, more of an observation really, is that, as you say, you started from 0, and I sort of realized when Kim was breaking down the different elements of the fandom, how much I mean, it's not just a TV show. It's not just like working backwards. It's not the escape room yet. It's not just the TV show. This is like going all the way back in the books, and to 100 years or so to the Conan Doyle. So all of that was really interesting, and I guess that made me think about the show slightly differently. But yeah, like I say, that's just an observation. So what were your main social channels for this campaign? That's one question that came in.
We were using, so Twitter was our main real-time platform. We did have a Facebook page, but that was like everything had a very specific function, and the Facebook page was there to play to the larger sort of fan audience. So they were much less engaged. So our hardcore engagement mostly happened on Twitter, and then on Tumblr. The fans were very engaged on Tumblr, but we were playing to a more UK audience because the escape room was in London. So Twitter was our key platform, but we were active on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and Facebook.
Cool, great. Just a random aside from me, have any of you done much work with TikTok of late?
Yeah, I mean, it's been more of an exploratory phase at this point. I mean, we haven't directly done campaigns so far on TikTok, but we've certainly been doing, as Nerd Pirates, our own research into that space. And I'm sure, Kim, your interest has been piqued, and all of us are just absorbing right now and in that discovery phase of what can we use TikTok for. But I think it's a fantastic platform, and we work in video games a lot, and I think especially for video games discovery,
it's an emergent space right now.
Huge space. But what about you, Kim?
So these days I still write social strategy, but I spend much more of my time doing social listening and like deep dive research. I've sort of moved more into sort of social research as a workspace over the last few years. So we do TikTok listening. TikTok listening isn't the greatest so far. There are various platforms that you can use. So I expect that over the course of they're doing a massive like ad sell in the UK at the moment, and that usually comes along with added listening and monitoring ability. So I'm hoping over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, the ability to listen across TikTok will get better. So we can actually start to see brands creating content that works for the platform. At the moment, I am seeing like quite a lot of brands making not like some missteps by using like vertical video content on TikTok, and it.
Cool. Okay. One question is there another recent campaign, social thing that you've seen that you're envious of, either in terms of its success or the ideas that it used?
I mean, I think it's too early to say the level of success, but I am very interested in the current Legend of Vox Machina campaign that's happening. What it is, it's advertising an Amazon Prime TV show, which is based on an ongoing D&D campaign that's been running for 4 years on Twitch and on YouTube. And I'm very fascinated to see how they deal with social there, because they have a hardcore fandom who've been watching the D&D campaign for 4 or 5 years. And then they have the new fandom who are watching the TV show for the very first time and know nothing about its backstory. So that one I would keep an eye on right now for a very interesting case
they only
study.
launched the cartoon, I believe it was last week, its first episode came out. So we are eagle-eyed watching them to see how they're going to handle the various audiences, and because they've got a lot of creative opportunities there. So that's our current watch spot.
Cool. And Kim, have you seen anything recently?
It's not so recent, but thinking about what the Nerd Pirates just said and some research, like some work that I'm currently doing at the moment, I was thinking about how Netflix handled the Shadow and Bone fandom, how they transitioned from like hardcore YA fans to kind of the broader Netflix fandom, while kind of mashing 2.5 books together. And that could have gone very, very, very badly. But they actually handled it incredibly well, not just by having the author involved as a screenwriter, but also by taking those two facets of the fandom and sort of uniting them via campaigns. Like there were various videos about how people who read the book felt about the TV show, and sort of acknowledging the issues that they were potentially going to have, and turning that into content that kind of played to the fans, I thought was a particularly smart move.
Great. Okay. And is there, I mean, it's a bit of a reductive question, but is creating successful fandoms, is it possible to boil it down to one, like, not creating successful fandoms, working with successful fandoms, because I guess that's more like what you do. Is it possible to boil down, kind of successful strategy to one thing, or maybe two?
Be authentic.
Yeah.
Be
Be
authentic.
a fan.
Yes.
Like there are so many people that aren't fans that do what we do, who are just like, you wouldn't believe the amount of people that you meet and who like work in marketing for specific entertainment projects, who are just not fans of the thing that they're marketing. And it shows. If you don't love it and you don't understand the things that other people love about it, then you can create great content, but you're never going to be able to do the community management that makes fans accept you. I don't know if I talked over you guys, sorry.
No,
I
I think
completely
you literally took the words out of my mouth. I think authenticity is number one, and that comes from understanding what that fandom operates like and what they want. I mean, we've done so many licensed games for different, Steven Universe and Adventure Time, and then Paw Patrol and Spirit, and they all have their own fandoms, that all have their own things they like, their own language, their own communities. And if you try and treat one fandom like another and just say they're all the same, then you're going to end up with a campaign that doesn't work.
And maybe this is kind of a hobby horse of mine, so apologies if this is kind of going off on one, but I always think that it's a moment like this to remember, and I think a lot of people outside of PR and marketing don't always think this way, is that PR and marketing is storytelling. I mean, you're not just promoting a story, you're telling a story, which may in turn help promote something else. That, if you're authentically a fan and you're telling an exciting story that you as a fan can get behind, then you're going to do well. But if you're just blindly advertising or making assumptions about the community, then I don't think you're going to make it very far. But yeah, we're big nerds. That's I guess that's the takeaway. Be a big nerd.
I remember I was managing social media for E4 for a little while, like as a to prove a hypothesis, and it was around the time that they'd got the rights to Supernatural. And I just had a ball, like, because obviously it was playing in the UK a year after it had played in America, so we'd already seen it all, and I had so many like gifts lined up. And I remember, like, on a Tuesday I tweeted pig in a poke, and like because no one had done that on the E4 platforms before, like the fandom just lost it and was so excited. And that meant that while we were on live later that night during Supernatural, it was just like we saw like more engagement that night than they had in like the previous like 3 months or something, because we were just back and forthing with the fans. Because if you're a fan and somebody who is running a social account is clearly also a fan, then there's like nothing better. It just makes you feel so seen.
Yeah.
Right. Video games. What's your favorite of recent times, if you do play video games? What's your favorite and why? And if it's got a story, why was the story good?
Oh my goodness,
so many good games.
I mean, I know it's really sort of strange to shout out something you worked on, but I feel so passionate about this. We worked on an indie game called Before I Forget, which was nominated for a BAFTA, and it was about a woman suffering with dementia. And that's not what people associate video games with. They think often the mainstream culture doesn't understand that video games can tell profound stories. And it was basically a sort of slice of life into what it might be like to experience that firsthand. And it was done very sensitively and beautifully and with research. And that kind of blew our minds when we saw that. It was from an amazing team. So yeah, looking into that was
Threefold Games. We've got to shout out to them because they did a magnificent job, and it was pushing the boundaries of what people think games are for and about. And I also I couldn't move forward unless I also just dropped Animal Crossing in there and then walked away. But it is brilliant.
Are you guys playing Cozy Grove as well?
No, I need to be.
Oh my god, you got to be playing Cozy Grove. So for me, it's currently Witchwood, which was so good. Cozy Grove, and then Calico, which I am just desperate for them to release more content for, because I've never been so excited to play a game, just like witches hanging out, and you can ride a giant cat, you get a broomstick in the end, the outfits are great, the music is perfect. I only play cozy games.
Fair.
Fantastic. Great. Well, we haven't got any more questions, and I think that sort of wraps it up nicely. And we're a little bit early for the break, but that means we get sort of extra 5 minutes on the break. So thank you again, Kim, Lily, and Viola. It's really just absolutely brilliant to hear you talking about the Sherlock stuff and all the other work that you've done. And yeah, thank you again. And if there's any more questions, they might come via Twitter or something. But yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you for having
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Cool.